For this module, I decided to examine two items I've used for instruction in brick and mortar classrooms. One is a worksheet created in Microsoft Word, and the other is a crossword puzzle um, that was actually scanned in from a book that was produced to supplement teaching Death of a Salesman. Both of these were used in my actual classroom at one point or another. I will now be evaluating them for their online accessibility according to the UDL guidelines with reference to the UDL guidelines and our textbook. First, I'll start with the Microsoft Word document. And before I get too deep into this, I decided to use a Word document and a PDF document. Although they're fairly similar in their function, I was curious to see what the particular electronic digital accessibility pitfalls of each would be compared to one another, because while they are intended to carry out similar functions, I don't know what the pros and cons of using one format versus the other would be for an online environment. So I decided to explore that because with my teaching style, I tend to like to create handouts of this sort often. So I think that it will be really relevant to me to explore this. Returning to my analysis, looking at the Word document, looking at the guidelines from the handbook, the online accessibility handbook, honestly, it's rather poor in terms of accessibility. Here you can see the title and several subsections. Complete subject and predicates would be the name of the worksheet. Here's subsection A, subsection B, and subsection C, along with blank spaces in between to fill in answers, or in some cases, like this first part, this was clearly written to be or created as a print handout because it says to circle the subject and underline the predicate, which, this is not even adapted to be able to do that online. But that aside, I mean, on a basic level, I can't imagine that a screen reading software would have much difficulty, at least finding the words. However, um, I don't have any formatting applied, for example, to be using heading 1, 2, or 3, or anything like that. These all fall under the same sort of category, which would make it difficult for a screen reader to differentiate between the subheadings and things of that sort. Um, I think it would be difficult to differentiate between subsections. Um, Also, there's no real tab order to speak of in this document because, like I said, it all is formatted the exact same way, and I'm not sure how accessible this allows that to be. One moment, please. Apologies, the screen recording shifted. Yeah, I'm not sure how accessible this allows it to be without clearly defined tab orders and anything of that sort. Um, on top of that, like I said, there are spaces to write answers, but these aren't actual form fields. So it's not like, a visually impaired learner would be able to hold his mouse over the section or, tab through it and have the alt text tell him, to respond to the question using a complete sentence using the word justice. Um, that simply doesn't seem to be possible with this Word document. So it seems to be rather poorly suited to being online accessible. Um, there's a lack of proper lists here as well, and by that I mean simply listing the questions underneath the subsections, which again would create a problem with the screen reader, I would imagine. Um, Also, I wonder about the color contrasts. I wonder if black against white is really the best thing to use, or if there's other color combinations that I could have been using, or perhaps I could have used colors to emphasize different sections. Um, On top of that, I wonder about the size, although obviously various programs could address the issue of increasing the size for visually impaired learners, or even Word itself could be increased in size, zoomed in, as you can see. But Otherwise, I think this is a document that's rather poorly suited to online accessibility, unfortunately. Moving on to the other document that I'm going to be analyzing here for its uh, online accessibility. Here is the crossword puzzle that I created for Death of a Salesman. Um, or rather, pardon me, the crossword puzzle that I used for Death of a Salesman. I got this from a text or a book that had less teaching materials for Death of a Salesman. This was scanned in, which was one of the recommendations in the online accessibility guide. It is searchable. It has undergone OCR text recognition. I made sure to do that in Adobe Acrobat. I just did it to Adobe Acrobat, but I imagine the scanner could have also done it on its own. Um, Here's what one I find really interesting because a crossword puzzle like this, as you can see, these aren't exactly forms. These are just blank squares for students to write in. So this doesn't seem to be adapted in any way to be used online, as it is. If I were to upload this, say, onto an online learning class, I don't see how uh, how accessible this is to a learner who may have a hearing or a visual um, issue, learning issue, because I have no idea how they would tab through these squares. There's no form for them to fill in. Even down here at the clues for the answers, this isn't really a proper list. This is just text on each side. Um, so I don't know how they'd shift through it. Um, these blanks in some of the questions, they're not like things to be filled in, but I don't know how what I have here would be able to get across to someone using, say, a screen reader program. Perhaps the screen reader program read Biff calls Billy a fine troubled. I don't know what it would do. Like, I feel like there's no alt text or anything to tell the screen reader program what this is to help the learner get that. And like I said, I there's no tab order to speak of, and the most glaring issue, given this a crossword puzzle, is there is no way for anyone to fill this in. There's not even form fields. So, yeah, I'm not sure how I'd even navigate a accessible crossword puzzle. Perhaps there's more dedicated programs to that or educational tools online, but just looking at this right now and evaluating in terms of its online accessibility, this crossword puzzle, I mean, I'd almost say it shouldn't even be used in an online class, if I'm trying to be as accessible to as many learners as possible. Um, yeah, so that concludes my analyses of two of these learning materials that I have used in a brick and mortar classroom. First being the worksheet I created in Microsoft Word, and the crossword puzzle that I scanned into a PDF document. My conclusion is that they're very poorly equipped and not very accessible in their current forms, but perhaps there are ways of improving that through using different softwares or simply structuring them a little differently. In the case of the Microsoft Word document, using headings and lists and things of that sort, and ensuring that there's some sort of tab order. Uh, all right. Thank you. That concludes my analysis for this module.